Framing actually looks really good. We didn't even try that. All right,
Yeah.
hello. We should be live here. Get some
Yep.
people in here. And of course, everyone in the chat is like, "Oh, you guys are late by literally 45 seconds."
Yeah.
So here we are, 45 seconds late. Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. I can't believe we're
We're
so
45
delinquent.
seconds late to being 10 minutes early. I just want to
That's a
point
good
that
way
out.
to think about it. That's very true, folks. Count your blessings here. Like, this isn't even part of the podcast. This is just bonus content.
Yeah.
So we're 10 minutes early for the podcast. That's the way to think about it.
Exactly.
Ooh. There we go. Just readjusting the old microphone. Right. Welcome. Episode 2. Well, this is actually not episode 2. This is Sunset on episode 2. And
Yep.
it's ironic because Noah and I are on the East Coast, and the sun set many, many hours ago. So,
Yeah,
realistically,
so-
this is more like a sunset during daylight savings time.
Yes.
Close
But
enough.
that's all right.
Another thing that a lot of people pointed out is that there's a black line that flashes at the top of Noah's screen every once in a while. We're aware of that. We have very bad capture cards, so at some point we'll get better ones. But you know what? It's a podcast. The video is really just additional. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you get the audio, that's the most important part. I don't know, the black bar is kind of fun. You can make a little game out of it, take a drink of water every time the
water,
black
of
bar
course.
appears.
Speaking
Of
of water,
course.
oh man, I left my water. I gotta get my water. All right, Noah, you gotta do like a little act. Do like a little do some stand up while I get my
Oh,
water.
jeez. Well, you better be quick with that because I'm not too good with that. So, how about that water? You can't forget it.
That was some great
Gotta-
stand up, ladies and gentlemen. This
Thank you.
has
Thank
been
you.
Noah Rubin's stand up comedy hour. Now I'll do my stand up. How about that Noah stand up? Am I right? It's pretty bad.
Oh.
Makes me more like Noah sit down. Am I right?
Well, I am sitting down, so that's why it fell a little bit flat there.
I don't think that's why. I think there's a lot of other reasons, most of which have to do with with how bad you are at stand up, but that's all right. So here we are. We got 6 minutes. 6 minutes until we launch the old podcast episode 2. Someone else was pointing out in the chat that we're rocking I'm rocking the AirPods Max. As we noticed last week, we even have color coordinating. Like, look at that. We got the silver AirPods with the silver jacket. And then Noah's
Yep.
got the blue, what are those?
They are Bose QC35-2s.
With replaced ear cups, right?
Yes, I did replace the ear cups, but they are pretty similar color to the originals.
Or were they not the same? Wait, did you get like OEM replacements?
So it's kind of funny. I ordered OEM replacements. They only have black and silver because these are the Triple Midnight, which was a limited edition, so they don't have replacement ear cups for them. So I ordered them in silver because I thought that might look kind of cool. But then I ended up buying third-party ones on Amazon, and I meant to cancel my order for the OEM ones because these work pretty well, but I forgot to do that, so now I have an extra set of ear pads lying around.
Silver ones?
Yes, they are silver. I feel like it could look kind of cool with the dark blue, so might try them
I
out.
gotta say, a little bit of two-tone is definitely a vibe. I mean, you ever see old cars from the 1950s? You got like that eggshell white roof with like a robin's egg blue coachwork. That is
Yeah.
That's some good stuff right there. You could even do like a nice sort of a pastel yellow with an eggshell roof. There's a lot of combinations there. Two-tone needs to come back. I think two-tone is, quite frankly, a lost art.
Yeah, I could definitely, especially with like nice minimalistic design, put a little two-tone in there to give it some
Yeah.
flair.
Maybe even a subtle gradient. You know I love a good gradient.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big gradient guy.
Yeah.
Now, so I've noticed we've gotten a number of people asking, the typical sort of MacBook questions. So I figure we'll do just the one because this is a question that I get a lot. Would an M1 MacBook Pro be good for video editing? And the answer, of course, is yes. They're very, very good. Put whatever storage you want and whatever RAM you want. But if you saw my recent video, it might not. If you're gonna spend more than $1,800 on an Apple Silicon computer, I would hold off, just because we got the new batch, the M1X, the 14-inch coming out, and I would suspect that that's going to be priced above the M1. So if you're looking for hardcore video editing and you want to spec out an M1 because you look at it and you're like, oh, I wish it had more power, that's the exact scenario where you should wait, because the M1 is literally the first one, and you will regret it for 100 years if you jump on the first one out there and miss like the 14-inch MacBook Pro. You will regret it deeply.
Yeah, and I feel like we're expecting it hopefully fairly soon, so I'd wait. Before we start, we're a little bit low on time. First of all, my mom is watching.
Oh, really?
So on dark mode, as you may or may not know, we love our moms. They make an appearance in our intro and all that stuff. So hello to my mom who's watching. And I also wanted to really quickly, could you try opening the app?
Oh yeah.
I'm not. If it works,
What's it called?
I'll mention it. It's called Back Channel. It should hopefully be on your home screen. It's like an F icon.
Oh. I don't see it.
Nowhere on your home screen.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, maybe it didn't
try
install
searching
in
for it.
time.
F.
Well, the name of the app is Back
Back.
Channel. Yeah.
No, I'm not getting it.
Oh well.
You tried your
anyways,
best.
Yeah,
Do you want to give some
working...
context, because I feel like people are going to be confused?
I'll mention very briefly, because it's I don't really have it, or I guess I can show it on my phone really quick. So I was working on this app which I called Back Channel, and I'm proud of the name. But basically, the idea is that it would allow me and Luke. Wow, you really can't see that. It would allow me and Luke to communicate with each other. But basically, it's just you join this like little room, and you can tap buttons. Like you can say green is like I want to talk, yellow is I don't have anything to say, red is like look at the clock, we got to move on. So I was working on this app just to like let us communicate with each other without having to talk or text or something. I guess it's not ready for this week, but hopefully next week we'll be able to use it. So, just wanted to...
that's going to be in a couple of days. That's going to be the next big social media network. Just you wait. Mark our words. Dark mode is where the next big hit social media platform got started, and it just got started because Noah and I wanted to talk to each other during the podcast.
Yeah, well, you know what? If that Yo app can take off, then I feel like pretty much anything can.
You're not wrong. All right, so it looks like we are coming up on 9 p.m. Looks like the sun is nearly going down. Also, I've just now realized as I said that we call this the pre-show sunset, and we do this on Sunday, so that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of we're definitely getting the sun motif here.
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started?
All right.
All right. Welcome to Dark Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from two technology experts. And that's not just what we call ourselves. It's what our moms tell people when their iPhones won't connect to the Wi-Fi. I'm your host, Luke Miani.
And I'm your host, Noah Rubin. On this show, we take questions from listeners, attempt to answer them to varying degrees of success, and maybe even have a laugh or two along the way.
And sometimes we mess up the intro. which is what I just did, regrettably. But you know what? It's too late now. The podcast is started, so we just got to go on with it. Now,
all right.
our first topic for tonight, really sort of fittingly, in keeping with the name of our show, which is, of course, Dark Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice, is, the age-old debate. And by age-old, I mean like the last 2 or 3 years. Light mode versus dark mode.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so this question comes from It Is Logical, who sent us a lot of questions and continues to do so, which is great because we love the questions. Submissions at drkmodepodcast.com. You can send us some questions, but this is one of many from this particular person. And so, yeah, the question of dark mode versus light mode. And this question is especially contentious or especially important in the programming realm. And I will say that a lot of programmers are very fixated or passionate, I should say, about dark mode. And you can find plenty of memes on the internet about, dark mode and making fun of people who use light mode on their IDEs and code editors and all that stuff. My personal opinion is light mode during the day and dark mode at night. So on Mac OS and iOS and all that, I have the automatic mode set up. And I think that's perfect because during the daytime, I want my screens to be bright because there's, bright lights around me. It looks like it's daytime. It can sometimes, for me personally, I think be a little bit easier to read. But then at nighttime, I don't want to strain my eyes as much. It's dark out and I want, my screens to be a bit darker. So definitely dark mode at that point. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. I don't think it should be, but maybe it is.
Well, I mean, you say that, but let's keep in mind that we are talking about the internet here, where anything can be a controversial opinion. And if I may, see, you've sort of come at this from a pragmatic approach. And I have to say, I fully agree with you in terms of programming. I think light mode, given how much is like text on screen with otherwise empty windows, light mode would be pretty terrible on that. It's the same thing with like Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro doesn't even have a light mode because it would just be blindingly bright and hard to see. Like, think about it in your head. Dark mode has been on Final Cut Pro since Final Cut 10. That's 10 years. Final Cut 10 came out in 2011, and it has been dark mode
really?
even. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't
You're
that crazy?
right. Wow. You're right, but that's like longer than I would think.
I know. I still think of it as new because do you remember we learned Final Cut 7 in high school? Granted, that was when Final Cut Pro, when 10 was already out, but we learned on 7, which was light mode, and then 10 was dark mode. It has been from the very beginning, even before the debate of dark mode versus light mode existed, because from a graphical interface standpoint, there are certain cases where dark backgrounds are just objectively better. But I think, if I may, the whole debate here has come not down to practical application, but down to aesthetics, which is a pretty subtle but noticeable difference. Like, I'm talking menu bar, dock, the bars at the top of Windows. On the phone, you're talking in different applications like YouTube Studio, which I have to say I prefer in dark mode. Maybe that's a bit niche. Admittedly, there's not a ton of people out there with YouTube Studio as like a primary application that they use. I am, of course, one of those people. But I think, for me personally, I don't have it switch automatically because, and this is very important, the whole sort of general ambiance of my device is set by the wallpaper. And if I have a light-themed wallpaper, I want to be in light mode. If I have a dark-themed wallpaper, I'm in dark mode. So for me, it's dependent on that. Like if I'll do a little demonstration here. If you're listening to this podcast, then I'm sorry because you can't see this, but I have the blue iPhone 12 Pro Max, and I have a sort of dark blue wallpaper theme, and I have it in dark mode. So see that? It all goes together. That's where I like dark mode. It's about aesthetics for me.
Well, that's fair. And to that point, that's why I really appreciate the dynamic wallpapers or whatever they're called that will adjust the theme. So on my iPhone, I have the iOS 12 default background, and on my Mac, I have the one with the waves, and even on my work computer, I have a work computer background that is also a dynamic background or whatever it's called. And I appreciate that the wallpaper, because I don't really change my wallpaper, but I don't have to, I don't conform my theme to the wallpaper. It's the wallpaper conforms to the theme. So I will say that I'm able to keep the aesthetic as far as that's concerned, with being able to switch between dark and light mode.
I hate to go back, but you did say iOS 12 when I think you meant iOS 14, and I was very amused by that.
I think iPhone 12, iOS 14 mixed me up a little bit, but yes, I did say iOS 12.
That does make sense. I wish that they would sync up the iPhone numbering with the iOS numbering, because that's already synced up with the chip numbering. Like,
right.
That's something that not a lot of people talk about, actually. Like, some people wonder, why did Apple start with A4 when they made their first Apple Silicon chip for the iPhone in 2010? And that's because it was iOS 4. So it really wasn't the fourth chip. There haven't been 14 iPhone chips made by Apple. There have really only been 10. But regardless, yes, I do agree with that. However, I have to say, while I appreciate you're clearly making that sort of logical consistency argument in terms of your wallpapers, what if you don't want one of the, what do they have, like they only have a handful of dynamic wallpapers. So if you don't want one of those, like Big Sur, I have to say the Big Sur default wallpaper has not gotten old on me. Light or dark mode, I think both of those look really good. And every time there's a new version of Mac OS, you get that new wallpaper and you're like, I'm like on top of it. I got the new wallpaper. I'm so cool. And then like 2 months later, it's a default wallpaper. And you change it. So if you do want to change it, what do? Because now your aesthetics are going to be all whack.
Well, I guess at that point, it is possible to make your own dynamic wallpaper or to find one. For me personally, I generally stick with the default wallpapers. Occasionally, I'll set it to a picture that I take. Generally, I'm not a good photographer, so I keep it to the default wallpapers. But okay, that is a real problem. That is a real problem that someone could have. A real first world problem.
Not enough people are talking about this. This is a serious issue that affects millions of people per year. Dark mode aesthetic 101. And I have to say, I don't feel comfortable calling ourselves sage advice givers when our advice is use a default wallpaper. You know what I mean? I feel like we got to do better than that. What we really need is there some sort of a program you could make that changes the wallpaper in accordance to the time, so that when you go to light mode, you have a lighter version. When you go to dark mode, you have a darker version?
Well, you can already make custom. So like the wallpaper that I have for my work computer is actually made up of 24 pictures, one for each hour. And macOS will automatically switch the pictures based on the hour. So you can do some pretty cool, like sunrise, sunset looking kind of things with that. So if you want to invest the time, and if you have a good design that you can make or find, you can make it work.
So I guess our sage advice is become a graphic designer.
Yes.
And make your own wallpaper.
Yes. Or if I may make one suggestion before we move on, if you just turn on the invert colors, then your computer will always look bad no matter what you do, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Well, that's a great point. Actually, now that you mention that, have they brought Smart Invert over to macOS? Because remember, before iOS had dark mode, everyone was like, "Oh, well, if you use Smart Invert, you can make a dark mode," and it's only very weird. I don't know if they have that on the Mac though.
I'm not sure. And I don't know what that would do to the wallpaper. This is the kind of science that we need to be investing in.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, I think it's really, really shameful that Apple is not investing in this smart inversion technology for the Mac. Clearly, they've got all the work done for the iPhone. So, the real question here is, why do we not have more tools for creating light and dark mode switching aesthetics? Because I have to say, Noah, I can't really argue with you on your logic. I was really hoping that you were going to say something that I could poke all sorts of holes in because, well, it's more fun to poke holes than to just agree with you. That's boring. However,
True.
I really don't have anything.
No, I mean, that's pretty typical, right? I say something and, flawless, no holes in it, right?
Well, I mean, I suppose the best that you could do is sort of scotch tape on a colander. I would say that's generally like your most sound arguments. This one, I'll admit, this one was a bowl. That it's airtight, watertight, if you will. But normally, it's more scotch tape on a colander.
If you can't name 20 times that I've made a bad point in the next 5 seconds, then
this
I was
seems
right
like a
every single
leading
time.
question. I feel like this is a trap, and I'm not going to.
Not your
fall
time's
for
up.
it.
Not your
No,
time's
no,
up.
no, 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 no. That doesn't count. Okay. Issue number 1. There was one time where you said iOS 12 when you meant to say iOS 14. You made a fool of yourself.
I was making sure that you were listening, and fortunately you were. No.
You were not making sure I was listening. That was one of, I think, if not the biggest blunder in podcasting history.
Well, if that's the case, then I would say podcasting has not had too many blunders up to this point.
Well, name 20 worse podcast blunders in the next 5 seconds.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm sorry, your time is up. So, sorry, but I guess, you couldn't make that argument work. Scotch tape on a colander. I don't know what to tell you.
All right, you know what? Touche. I will give that one to you.
All right, now I believe we have our next topic here.
Yes.
Now that I'd say, handily defeated Noah in the art of the sort of verbal combat jousting that we have here. Yes, for sure. So yeah, would you like to introduce our next topic for tonight?
Yes. So this next topic comes from Eric. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. ERICH. I think it's Eric. So the question is basically the trade-off between upgrading your device and just getting a new one. How much effort do you put into upgrading your device? How much effort can you put into upgrading your device? And when do you sort of throw in the towel and say, okay, I'm gonna upgrade at this point? That's our next topic.
So you've sort of used upgrade interchangeably there. For on the one hand, upgrade referring to continuing to extend the life of your current device, and on the other hand, referring to purchasing a new device. So I just wanted to clarify that in this particular case, we're talking about the merits of continuing to extract value and use from the device you already own versus trading it in and purchasing a new one. Now, I will always say trade it in because there are 0 acceptable circumstances where you should throw away a MacBook. It's surprising that people do, but apparently there are some people out there who are like, this computer's kind of slow or maybe a little broken, therefore it's going in a landfill. That is a really bad thing to do. I highly, highly doubt that anyone who's listening to this will or has done that. And if, in fact, you are listening to this and you have done that, then, you can see yourself out. That's really shameful behavior there, and we don't condone that here on Dark Mode. This is for sage advice only. If it is not sage, if it's like rosemary or thyme, get out of here. That was a little herb pun.
Did you have that one saved up since you thought of the slogan?
Had that one locked and loaded for a week and a half.
Yep.
I
Yep,
finally got
yep.
to use it. Now,
That's
so
great.
now Noah, you're a big you're really an expert on upgrading devices. Your 2011 MacBook Pro lasted you how many years?
Yeah, the 2011 lasted me until 2017. So I don't know, what is that? 6 years, right?
Yeah, and
somewhere.
it was,
I mean, it's months. Months are gonna come and go, but somewhere around
Yeah.
6 years.
to be fair, is sort of like early 2011 to the later half of 2017,
Hmm.
which was still pretty good. It lasted longer than your 2017 MacBook Pro did.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because my first computer was actually a 2009 13-inch MacBook Pro, and after 2 years, I got the 2011 15-inch. I mean, on the one hand, the 2009 13-inch was, pretty slow. There's no discrete graphics, whatever. Also, I was pretty young at the time, so I didn't necessarily know better as far as like being able to upgrade the components of the computer. But the 2011 lasted me a very long time, probably longer than it should have or could have. But I did do quite a bit with that 2011. I was able to upgrade. Well, first of all, it went through I think 2 or 3 graphics cards because the 2011s were famous for the graphics failure. And I know there were.
I suspect that they. So you took it in for the replacement program twice. I suspect they did not, in fact, replace the graphics card. There were some reports that came out pretty long after the fact. We're talking like 2014, 2015, 2016 here. There were reports that came out after the fact suggesting that, in fact, what they were doing was kind of heat shocking the GPU instead of replacing it. And they sort of had a sliding scale of GPU failure, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you're talking about a known manufacturing defect. But regardless, it had multiple GPU remedying procedures.
Yes. Yeah, so a bit of work, and I think there were maybe some other things that I had to take it in for. So quite a bit there. And then on my end, I did upgrade the RAM to 16 gigs. I took out the CD drive and I put in an SSD and a hard drive, and I had this whole crazy system where so the SSD was split in half and the hard drive was split in half, and I made a Fusion drive for Mac OS, and then I also had Boot Camp, so I installed Boot Camp on the SSD, and I used half of the HDD as like extra storage for Steam games and stuff like that. So I put quite a
That
bit.
was really harebrained, that little scheme, and it was not very much. I mean, how much? It was not more than 256 gigabytes on that SSD, right?
The SSD was probably like 256, and then the hard drive was
The original one.
500 maybe. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was not much.
Oh wait, no, because you went through a number of hard drives before even the SSD. I remember us replacing the hard drive at least once or twice. I don't remember.
Yeah. It was a
But
while
you see,
ago.
the problem is, like, in terms of upgrading, we've really gone on quite of a tangent here from the original question.
Yeah.
But the point of that tangent was that Noah was able to modify and extend the life of that computer. 6 years in computer years is a very long time, and we should also point out that that was the base model MacBook Pro. So he was using the what is it, an AMD 6490M with 256 megabytes of VRAM in like 2017 for, video editing, for pretty high level programming work. That was a very, that was pretty big deal in those days.
Yeah.
But it's also worth noting, I think, that I don't necessarily know that would be something that you could replicate now, because, well, a number of things have changed since that time period. The first of which is basically there is no upgradability on a Mac anymore.
Right.
And more PCs. I mean, if you look at premium PCs, a lot of them are ditching upgradable RAM. Some are ditching upgradable storage. Upgradability is going away. However, the lifespan of devices is increasing, so that's a trade-off that has some costs and has some benefits. But I think the big one is from 2011 to 2017, the biggest thing that didn't change was Intel. That was the peak of Intel's essential monopoly and subsequent stagnation in the CPU market. They didn't do anything. It was unbelievable. We had like 6 straight years where everything was quad core. i5s were 4 cores, 4 threads. i7s were 4 cores, 8 threads. Mobile i5s were 2 cores, 4 threads. Mobile i7s were 4 cores. Everything was the same for like 6 years. They went from Ivy Bridge, which was great, to Sandy Bridge. No, sorry, other way. Sandy Bridge to Ivy Bridge. And then we went to Haswell. And then there was like a little bit of Broadwell where it was like, what's that all about? And then we went to Skylake. And then, I mean, Intel's still kind of on Skylake in terms of their, what do they call it? Like the TikTok plus a million. So 2011 to 2017, yeah, sure, it was a 6-year-old computer, but in terms of like processing horsepower, the 2017 MacBook Pros were still 4 cores, 8 threads. They weren't that much faster.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So then the question basically becomes like when I got that base model 15-inch, you know, obviously by the end of its lifespan, I guess the graphics and the screen, you know, not being Retina display were sort of the 2 main limiting factors. But then to bring it back to the question, at this point, you really can't upgrade anything. You know, you buy a new Mac, especially an M1 Mac where, you know, it's all built, you know, it's all soldered on, it's all built in, all that. So then the question sort of becomes, it's not so much do you upgrade, you know, your internals or do you get a new one? But I think the question becomes, do you attempt to future-proof? And when I say that, you can't future-proof, but you can spend more upfront to make your computer last longer. And so the question is, where's the trade-off between doing that or just, you know, buying a less expensive one and upgrading it sooner? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because that's really the question that we're gonna have to grapple with for the next foreseeable future, really, because I don't think upgradability is coming back in a big way. So I guess there's sort of 2 ways to think about it, and the first way is when you're talking about right now, there are a lot of people that have like mid-2012 unibody MacBook Pros, which are starting to be on the cusp of that decision point. A lot of people stuck with the mid-2012 unibodies because they didn't like the reduced upgradability of the Retinas, and then they really didn't like the butterfly keyboard. And then now we're starting to emerge from that tunnel into the Apple Silicon age, where it starts to become a question of, okay, do I keep my mid-2012 going with an SSD upgrade or with more RAM or repasting the CPU GPU to make it a little bit cooler running or whatever? But realistically, I don't think that there's a whole lot that can be done because like even in the last 10 or 15 years, you know, we talk about upgradability. Really, all we are talking about is storage and RAM. There are almost 0 computers, not just Macs, but computers that are laptops with upgradable CPUs and GPUs. And the ones that do have those are pretty bulky. And even then, you're still usually confined to whatever CPU generation that computer was built in. So in terms of making a computer faster, there's not a whole lot that you can do for an old MacBook. That's just the sad reality. If you have a Retina and you want to upgrade the storage, NVMEs are cheap right now. That's a great idea, absolutely. But the thing that you have to watch out for if you're upgrading a computer, whether this is a Mac or a PC, is essentially, are you putting in more than you are getting out afterwards? The analogy that I said with Noah when we were planning for this was it's like buying a 2-bedroom house and adding a 6-car garage to it. You are not going to get the value that you put into that 6-car garage out of it when you sell the house. When you put dual 1 terabyte SSDs in a mid 2012 MacBook Pro with 16 gigs of RAM, you're going to spend $200 and you are not going to add $200 to the worth of the computer. So when it comes to older Macs like that, I think we're nearing the point where it's like, if you're going to upgrade it reasonably. Otherwise, you're sinking money into, let's be honest, a 9-year-old computer.
Yeah, because you get to the point, I mean, especially with the 2012s, like the unibodies, not Retina displays, and you've got some older ports on there. You still got There's still FireWire, right? Yeah. So you got old FireWire, you got old Thunderbolt, maybe it's Thunderbolt 2, but it's or maybe it's Thunderbolt 1, but it's old. And even if you have a Retina, and there's a few things you can do to them, but even if you have a Retina, you are still you still have Thunderbolt 2, you don't have USB-C. You're going to start losing, eventually you're going to lose official support for Mac OS, and that'll come sooner on an older computer, obviously, than if you upgrade. So then that's the point where then you start getting into patching the operating system and all that stuff, and not supported, and maybe some things don't work quite right. And then it becomes a question of not just how much money you're going to put into it, but how much effort you're going to put into it, and how much jank you're willing to live with. And at some point it becomes compelling enough that you finally bite the bullet and upgrade.
And that's what Apple is trying to do right now. They're trying to make those bullet bitings much more easy. They're trying to make it from, instead of biting a bullet, they're trying to make it into like more like licking a paintball, I guess. Where I don't know if that really works, but you're not biting the bullet as much as you're licking the paintball. You're like, okay, you know what? If you've had a 2012 MacBook Pro since new, then you know what? You get a high five and a handshake from Tim Cook, because let's be honest, you spent probably less than $2,000 and you got 9 years of use out of a computer. Congratulations. You've won. That is end game for extracting the most value out of a computer that you possibly can. And guess what, folks? That mid-2012 15-inch MacBook Pro still has, I don't know, $400 of value in it if it's been modestly upgraded and has, decent condition, decent battery life remaining on it. That's really good. To be able to buy like a base model mid-2012 in 2012 for, what were they, $1,799, $1,800? Then I don't know, let's say you put $200 into it in terms of like a little bit of upgrades. Maybe you had to get a new charger. You spent $2,000 on a computer, used it for 9 years, and then get $400 for it secondhand. That's redonkulous. That's incredibly good, and you should not feel guilty about that. If obviously, money-wise, it might still be a big commitment to upgrade, but if you feel bad about, maybe I didn't get the most out of that computer, you absolutely did. You've completely won that one. I would argue that 5 or 6 years is probably a sweet spot for upgrades in terms of, because basically you're talking total cost of ownership, right? So if you buy a computer for $1,000 and 5 years later it's worth $500, which is the case with a lot of Macs, that costs you $100 a year. That's insane for technology. Technology depreciates faster than a bag of bricks being thrown off a building, which is a sound analogy.
Yeah, before I give my 2 cents, I just have to say I feel like licking a paintball would probably give you some sort of poisoning. So I wouldn't recommend it.
It's not really like it's not like a lollipop lick. I'm just talking like a little just a one,
I would just say probably don't swallow.
All right, well,
you can lick the paintball, but you gotta wipe it off after that.
I highly doubt. Okay, first of all, I feel like paintballs are non-toxic because if you're in a paintball fight, there's going to be some paint that goes in your mouth, and if that kills you right away, then you might as well be in a normal gunfight at that point. Like,
Okay,
if
well,
you're
I
gonna
feel
die
like
from ingesting the paint in paintball, why even do it?
okay, I'm sure someone in the chat plays paintball and they'll tell us who's right. But I feel like first of all, you're probably gonna wear a helmet of some sort, so I would hope that it wouldn't get in your mouth. And I'm not saying that it's gonna kill you instantly. I'm just saying that generally you're not supposed to swallow paint products or ingest paint products. I just wanted to. It was just such a weird analogy. I couldn't leave it unaddressed.
Now, this is really groundbreaking stuff to be covering on a podcast. I mean, when you listen to this podcast, did you really think that the sage advice was going to be, don't eat paint?
Well, that is sage
that's
advice.
a curveball. That is a curveball right there. I
It's a
did not
curved
know
paintball. It's a curved paintball.
that. Uh-huh. Kind of clunky there. I'll give you that one.
No, that was not. That was perfectly relevant. Not very clunky. You have to give me that. Come on.
A little clunky. I did say that I'll give you that one though, because that was
Thank you.
I mean, it was sort of a low bar. You know, it's kind of a low branch there with I kind of gave you all the ingredients.
Well, I kind of figured that you did, and I wanted to to complete the pass. If you.
Oh, there we go. Is that a sport analogy from Sport Ball?
I could not. I believe it is, but I couldn't tell you.
It sounds like it is. If you couldn't tell, Noah and I don't know the first thing about Sport Ball. Any of them. Any sport, any ball. I don't know anything about it. But what we do know is don't drink paint.
Yes.
Which is also somehow related to upgrading or not upgrading your mid-2012 MacBook Pro. I believe that's where we got started on that.
I mean, that was
Oh, yeah, your 2 cents. You had 2 cents to give.
I did. Well, I was going to... I guess it was sort of...
Cash App or Venmo?
Yeah. I was going to, I guess, sort of pivot a little bit and just say another way to look at it is the question of... some people, and I'm very guilty of this, is I have a computer and I'll say like, oh, it still works, it's fine, I'll keep using it. Versus if you do upgrade, maybe you don't need to upgrade, but if the computer is a lot faster and it has more features and you can get more use out of it, then even if the computer that you have right now works, there's another question to consider is the upgrade worth it just because the computer's better and it'll help me to, do what I do on it better? It's another question.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I think it's also an interesting distinction here because there's sort of two scenarios that you're touching on there. The first is I can afford to upgrade and should. The second is I want to be smart with my money. And sometimes being smart with your money doesn't necessarily mean don't buy anything ever. In the same way that, like, if you need to upgrade and you can afford to upgrade, if you do it wisely, then that's worth doing. I got an email a couple of days ago from someone who was using a computer that really is not well suited to their profession, that is actively harming their ability to do their job. And so in that way, a computer is an appliance. It's a tool that lets you do your job better. So a year ago, I bought an 18-core iMac Pro. If I weren't doing YouTube videos, that would be an outrageously stupid purchase. There's absolutely no need for an 18-core iMac Pro unless you're trying to upload YouTube videos. And even then, I still get comments where they're like, oh, you don't need that. Why do you need an 18-core MacBook Pro? MacBook Pro. I wish there was an 18-core MacBook Pro. Why do you need an 18-core iMac Pro? You're just uploading silly little YouTube videos. It's like, first of all, thanks. Thanks for the compliment. Great stuff. And second of all, if I can save 3 minutes on my first pass render, edit a little bit faster, save a couple minutes here and there, that is directly related to me being able to do my job and me being able to monetize my job as one does with a job. Every time there's a new Apple product, I upload on day one. My iMac Pro directly impacts my ability to make money on those days because it means I can upload a video faster. So if you're a graphic designer, you might say, I really can't afford to be buying a new computer that costs more than $400 or whatever. Think about it not in terms of like, okay, here's how much money I have and this is how much computer I can afford. Sometimes it's worthwhile thinking like, okay, how much is this going to improve my ability to do what I do? If you're freelance and you're a video editor and your expenses are sort of up to you, sometimes buying a good, well-targeted used computer that's got a good sweet spot of value can be one of the best things that you do. So sometimes saving money doesn't necessarily save you money, if that makes sense.
Right. That's definitely true. And you could also think about it, if you have the luxury of being able to afford an upgrade and not necessarily knowing. For what it's worth, I mean, I'd say your time is probably the most valuable thing you have, and it's not something that you can ever get back. And obviously when you're using a computer, it's not that much of a thing, but like my old 2011 MacBook Pro, it used to take a couple minutes to turn on, and then I'd have to wait 10 minutes to be able to use it. Yeah. Well,
it was literally 15 minutes to get in.
It would take, let's say 5 or 10 minutes to turn on. And then I'd have to wait for at least 10 minutes before I could do anything, or else it would be unusably slow and it would lock up and beach ball and whatever. But I put an SSD in it, and that was a pretty inexpensive upgrade. But then it turns on in 10 seconds and it's ready to go as soon as you log in. And that time save adds up a lot, and it means I can spend more time doing stuff that I want, and I don't have to worry about having to turn on. I don't have to worry. I used to make the joke when I would hang out with Luke, like I would get my computer ready, like 15 minutes before I wanted to use it, I'd go, like you're preheating the oven, I'd go turn it on, and I would wait for it to get ready, and I would say, oh, that's a good thing, I don't want to rush into it, I got to let it get ready. But obviously that was a joke.
You used to drive me insane when you would do that. You were always like, oh, don't worry, it's just warming up. It's good. It gives me some time to unwind. I'm like, what do you mean unwind when you can't do your job and what you need to do?
And to mentally prepare, you got to be in a certain headspace in order to use a computer. So,
yeah, one of the things, it's actually a feature when you put it like that, because, your computer starts turning on, and then you've got 10 minutes of meditation, of mindfulness. That was a big thing. Remember, is that still a thing? Do people still do mindfulness?
I would imagine, but it's definitely not as big of a thing as it was a few years ago.
Because I remember in one of my classes in high school, we used to start every single class with 10 minutes of mindfulness, which was very weird.
Really?
It was very awkward. Yeah. No, every single day. And keep in mind, high school classes, what were they, like 55 minutes?
Yeah.
60? I don't even know. It was like a fifth, a sixth of the class where we were just sitting there like, and then we would start. I don't know. Maybe my teacher just didn't have anything to say to fill the time.
Sounds pretty nice, though. It wasn't gym class, though, was it?
Oh, no. That would be hilarious.
Well,
Gym class
but
is
hang on.
not where mindfulness belongs, I feel like.
Well, but I'll tell you this, though, and we'll move on to the next topic in a minute. But when I did yoga in my gym class in high school, because we were able to choose from like a couple of options, and I chose yoga a couple of times. And for the last like 10 or 15 minutes, the gym teacher would turn off the lights and put on like meditation music, and we would just lie down on the yoga mats, and I would like almost fall asleep sometimes.
Oh,
so
now that you mention that,
memory.
Now that you mention that, I think I did do that. I just remember there were a couple of times. I mean, yoga was always like the life hack gym class, because half the time you would just basically sit around, and they called it learning. They called it gym, which is really, I don't know if the administration was aware of that, because I feel like they wouldn't be super happy to know that they were just like, all right, they just plugged into the speakers and just sat just laid down with the lights off for an hour,
Yeah.
and then the teacher got their tenured salary for that whole curriculum there. All right, do we
Yeah.
want to move on to our next topic?
I do appreciate that we went from upgrading IMAX to paintballs and yoga, so that's always fun. But we can sort of get back on track a little bit here and go on to another topic. And this next topic has to do with Apple potentially removing the charging port from iPhones, and I guess even more broadly, just the trend of tech companies removing ports from their devices.
Yeah, removing ports is an interesting one because I feel like we're sort of conditioned at this point to think that removing any port is bad, but this might be controversial. How many of you are sitting there missing your floppy disks, missing your CD drives? How many of you are sitting there really like, oh man, I would kill for a FireWire 800 port? And of course, as soon as I say that, we're gonna get some emails where it's like, oh well, actually, I use a FireWire 800 modem all the time or whatever. But the vast majority of people do not miss those things. I'll be honest. This might be even sort of leveling up the controversial opinion here. I
boy.
don't miss the headphone jack. I said it. I don't miss the
okay.
headphone jack.
That's
Thoughts?
fair. I mean, okay, to be fair, for me personally, I don't miss it either. Back in high school, I used to have my ear pods that I would keep in my pocket, and I could plug them into my phone. I could plug them into my laptop that I used at school and whatever. But then I got the AirPods in 2017, and now at this point, everyone's using Bluetooth AirPods. I mean, my Bose headphones, Luke has his AirPod Maxes. You can feel free to make fun of him for that. But all of these devices, right, are using Bluetooth. And so personally, and so here's an interesting discussion actually, and this is a discussion that I've had with my sister because she has open back headphones. They're wired, obviously wired open back headphones, and her headphones I think they were like $100, so they're not like audiophile by any means, but they're wired open back headphones, which is sort of the classic. You get bigger sound stage, you get more of like an around you kind of sound, whereas the closed back headphones, like the headphones that I have on, and that Luke has on, it generally sounds more like it's coming from inside of your head. Right. But then there's, sort of the trade-off there. And for me, having the Bluetooth feature, and I guess this is a little bit off topic, but, still relevant to the ports, I would just say that having the Bluetooth feature and being able to walk around without having a cord that I'm going to trip over, or, I'm sitting at my desk with my phone and I get up to refill my water or to, use the bathroom or something like that. And if I don't even have to take my phone with me if I'm, close enough in range. And so just the convenience of Bluetooth, you can talk about audio quality all day long, and you can fight about audiophile versus, consumer grade kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the Bluetooth is just so convenient that I don't know if I could go back necessarily.
I fully agree with you. And if I'm being honest here, if you're an audiophile spending thousands of dollars on headphones, or even like many hundreds of dollars on headphones, realistically, you're probably not using your iPhone for that anyway.
True.
I feel like someone's got to say it, like the DAC in the iPhone is not getting you the full range out of your $2,000 Sennheisers.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was mainly, it was never really about audiophiles or audio quality, because quite frankly, the iPhone is not an audiophile product. AirPods Max, which are $550, are not an audiophile product. Nothing Apple makes is niche. Even the Mac Pro, even the iMac Pro, they do not make niche products. That is just a simple fact. You can use it if you're in a specific niche, but it is 0% that Apple made it with you in mind, because that is not how they work. Tim Cook is a great and effective CEO because he knows not to chase specific target audiences. He chases down whatever is going to be broadly appealing, even if it pisses people off. And in that case, that was why they got rid of the headphone jack. You think Apple would have sold as many AirPods as they have if they still had a headphone jack on the iPhone? Do you think Apple would be selling as many AirPods as they are right now if they still shipped headphones in the box? These are all, 2-step ahead, 3-step ahead business decisions. AirPods were not, launched alongside the removal of the headphone jack by accident. And quite frankly, they weren't launched because wireless is better. They were launched because it made financial sense. And a lot of people have also seen the benefit in that. As ruthless as companies can be, we can't ignore the benefits of what this transition has meant. I mean, right now you can get AirPods on sale for $100. In 2016, AirPods at $160 were seen as like super high end and expensive, and they were hard to find because they were, being kind of scalped back then. Very low supply. But now wireless headphones are becoming more popular. More and more people are in need of wireless components because there's no headphone jack, and that drives the price down. So there's not really like this was a perfect decision or, this was a terrible decision. That's just not really how the tech space works. But I think if we may try to bring it back a little bit to the whole no port thing, I think what this question asker is really wondering is, are they getting rid of the Lightning port?
Right, that's the question, because in case you haven't noticed, there's only one port on the iPhone now. And if you're going to go truly port free, there are quite a few problems that you have to solve. And then the question is, can you solve those problems? And is the solution, reasonable enough that you're happy or willing at least to give up the port at that point? And does it create value? Does losing the port improve something that's worth, getting rid of it?
Exactly. That's, and I would guarantee that is the discussion that's happening at Apple. Because for them, it's not like, ooh, will it look better without a port? It's, okay, what, first of all, accessories can we sell? Because let's be honest, it's a company. Their goal is to make money. And if you can't get people to upgrade, then you can get people to add. So
right.
if you can't get away with raising the price of the iPhone, then you just raise the price of the things that go with the iPhone. Simple. Now, when we're talking about a portless phone, I think it's important that we take a moment and just kind of discuss our interactions with the Lightning port. Because there was a time.
Important.
Oh, see, that one's very good.
Thank you.
That was an excellent one. Good
Thank
bit of
you.
wordplay. We here on Dark Mode are big fans of wordplay.
Yes.
Very, very good.
Yes.
Now, with something as important as a port, there was a time where getting rid of the Lightning port is game over. Literally before wireless charging was on an iPhone. That's called a brick. If
it's
you
a
can't
one-time
charge it
use.
wirelessly. Yeah, it's a disposable iPhone.
You know what? Apple would. That's an interesting question, though. I'm sure they'd love to get all those sales, but the question, if you made a one-time use iPhone, could you get enough people to buy one-time use iPhones that you'd still make your money? I don't think so.
Look, let's be real. Banksy sold a one-time use painting that shredded itself while it was being sold. I think Apple could get away with at least a few single-use iPhones just for the meme factor of it.
Yeah.
But in terms of like pragmatically now in 2021,
yes.
I guess the question is, how often do you use the port on your phone?
Well, the first thing is I use the port to charge every single night. And the reason I very rarely, if ever, use wireless charging, and I don't have any MagSafe. First of all, we can get into the whole thing about MagSafe, and I think if Apple does remove the port, which they very well may, I think MagSafe was sort of the premonition, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, the premonition or the the event that sort of foretold the removal of the port. But I don't use wireless charging because it's inefficient. It makes the phone hot, or I should say it's less efficient than a regular old cable. It makes the phone heat up a lot. If you're using like first party MagSafe stuff, it's kind of expensive. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if you're paying $40 for the charger, and it doesn't come with the brick, right? You pay $40 for the puck, and you got to pay what, $20 for the compatible brick, right? So that's, you know, $60 if you want to use MagSafe. And I personally, as far as charging, I prefer to just, you know, plug in my cable. I have a 10-foot long cable. I have it plugged into a 5-watt power brick because I let the phone charge overnight and it'll charge slower, which hopefully won't hurt the battery quite as much. And I like that setup. I don't really want wireless charging for my bed.
That's actually quite surprising. I personally do have wireless charging. Ironically, I use a Google Pixel stand that Google sent me with the Pixel 3 back in 2018. Honestly, it's great. And that's I guess the one thing that you got to keep in mind about these sort of charging peripherals that we're not really used to having, because we're used to getting a charger with a phone. That's of the past. That's not going to happen. And I think basically it comes down to, realistically, a wireless charger is a one-time purchase. Unless it breaks, I've been using mine for 3 years. There's no need to get another one. So yeah, it's an added cost, but it's not a recurring cost. And I think that's interesting. It's sort of like with AirPods. Like, yeah, sure, people were spending $160 on headphones that usually came with the box. Now they don't come with the box, but people don't care because they already have their AirPods. They don't need to get new ones. And even with that, you could say AirPods are more consumable in that they will wear out battery-wise, audio driver-wise. They will wear out, whereas a wireless charger is probably going to be a multi-year thing for $40. That, to me, is not bad. And in terms of other scenarios where I would use a port, I can't think of any. You look like you have something to say, Noah.
I will say, first of all, we don't all get free wireless chargers from Google. So not some of us do, but not
I would
all
have
of
bought
us.
one. I would have bought one had that not been the case.
Fair enough. I will say, first of all, it's great that you can get a wireless charger from Google and use it with an Apple product. Obviously, if iPhones were to get USB-C, that would also be the case. It's not going to happen. And I suspect that another factor that Apple's considering is if, eventually they would want to move to USB-C if they're going to do anything. If they just nix the port before that happens, they don't have to worry. I think there was something in the EU or something where they were having some issues related to not using USB-C or using it. There's something going on there that I think they could sort of sidestep that whole thing if they didn't do it. But to be fair, you say you buy a wireless charger, and you can get cheap ones. I have a $10 wireless charger that I bought when I got my iPhone 10 in 2017, and I have it on my desk, and it works, and I've used it since then. But you can say the same thing about a cable. You buy a Lightning cable, and as long as you treat it decently well, it's not gonna die out on you. So you could sort of make the same argument. You can't use a Lightning cable with an Android phone, I'll give you that, but you can get into that argument. But I will agree with you though that $40, $60, whatever, to get a nice wireless charger and it'll last you for a long time, not that big of a deal. But for the other reasons that I said, as far as the phone getting hot, it being less efficient, I could be wrong. I think I read that it's worse for the battery health overall. I could totally be wrong about that, but just in general, I still prefer not to use it.
You might be right about it being worse for the battery, but from my experience, I don't know that it would be that big of an impact. And I have a pretty decent ground to stand on there because I had my iPhone XS Max for 2 years, and I wireless charged it since. So I got it in October of 2018, at the beginning of October, and I was wireless charging it from the end of October. So basically, a full 2 years of wireless charging that phone almost 100% of the time. And by basically just charging it when it needed to be charged, and then eventually they had like the smart charging thing where it'll learn your sleep schedule and it'll charge up a little bit and then stop and then charge the rest of the way in the morning before you wake up. I had that phone for 2 years, and I still have it. It is at 98% battery capacity. So
That's not
it
bad.
certainly did not have any sort of noticeable impact on me personally. In fact, that's really, really good. Like, taking care of your battery, 2 years with 98% capacity is really impressive.
Yeah, that's certainly better than I've ever done. I don't know what it is, but my iPhone batteries just don't last. They don't do well for me.
Yeah, your iPhone 10 was really dicey towards the end there, wasn't it?
Well, the 10 got bad, and then 2 years, and I had the iPhone 10 for 3 years, and then I upgraded to the 12 Pro. But after 2 years, I got the battery replaced at the Apple Store, and it helped a little bit. But by the end of the third year, I had that new battery for a year, and by the end of that third year, it was really not that great. So it could be, you know what? Maybe my charging habits are actually bad and yours are actually good, and I'm stuck in the past and you're actually right. It totally
What a
totally
plot
could
twist.
Be. It could
What a plot
be.
twist. Holy moly. This is crazy.
I'm not
Actually, now that you
confirming.
mention it, my mother, we started this whole bit talking about, it's what our mothers tell people when their iPhones won't connect to Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my mom didn't really have issues connecting to Wi-Fi, but she did have issues connecting to being on, insofar as the battery would die in like 40 minutes. So my mom had an iPhone 6S from new until, well, she bought the iPhone 12 that I reviewed off of me. So she had a 6S from end of 2015 until end of 2020, which is a really long time to have a single phone, and especially to have it still be supported natively by Apple in iOS 14, which is really impressive. However, what was not impressive was the battery life. Now, she didn't ever have like the throttle gate issue, but that battery, it was when I was switching over and migrating her data to the iPhone 12, I had the iPhone 12 plugged in and the 6S on battery, and it went from 75% battery to 5% battery in under half an hour. Wow!
So
it was like a fun little game. Sometimes it would drop more than 1%, like you'd watch it go down, and sometimes it would drop like 86 to 83. Like it would skip numbers. That's how fast it drained.
See, I was going to say it was like one of those hourglasses where you would turn it over and see the time go, but it sounds like it wasn't even an accurate hourglass.
No, it wasn't super accurate, but it was, I mean, I've never seen, like, you know how when you see the battery percentage go down, you're like, ooh, I just saw it happen.
Yeah.
Is that just me? Do you do that as well? When you see the battery percentage go down?
I don't see it. I guess I don't really stare at, especially since you don't see the battery percentage in the status bar unless you get Control Center. I guess I really don't see it that much these days.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's because it's so rare that I always, every time I saw battery percentage go down on like a Mac or phone or whatever, I'm always like, oh, I saw it go down. Oh boy, that's like cool. I don't know, it's kind of stupid, but this completely desensitized me to seeing battery percentage go down, because it was like every 10 seconds. It was hard to look at the screen and not see the battery percentage go down because it was draining so fast.
Right. I want to just say one more thing. We're wrapping up. We're coming up on an hour now, but just to say one more thing as far as removing the port. When you run into issues, that is a huge thing. Luke and I have been doing some stuff, and I'm not going to say much, but we've been doing a lot of recovery mode and a lot of DFU mode, and I'm not going to say anything more about that, but we've been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. And if you have a phone that you cannot fix yourself. I hate when I have a product and I can't do any sort of debugging, or I do as much debugging as I can, and then you got to call Apple and they tell you to do the same steps again. You're like, okay, I already did that. I know it's not. The more, if they take away the port and you can't, the phone is dead and there's something going on and the wireless charger won't wake it up, or you need to restore the operating system or whatever. When you need that sort of debugging, when you want a direct connection, maybe your connection is flaky, your Wi-Fi is not working very well. You're trying to, copy airdrop a file, or you're trying to, even Xcode. I'm using Xcode to sideload an app onto my phone, and sometimes Xcode, my phone gets disconnected from Xcode, and if I just plug it in for a second, I can run my app. If not, I gotta restart the phone, I gotta check the Wi-Fi settings, a whole thing. When you have situations like that, and you have no option but to, restart your phone or go to Apple if your phone's not working, that, to me, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if it's fine 90% of the time, the 10% of the time that it's not fine is going to be 50 times more annoying than when you can fix it by plugging it in. And speaking of plugging it in, let's plug you subscribing to this podcast if you're not already.
Ooh,
that was really smooth. Well, okay, I'll admit it wasn't the finest, but sometimes you just gotta get that in. We're already going over time here.
That was
so
about
we really
got
to wrap this up.
I just want to say that was about as smooth as chunky peanut butter, and I liked that about as much as you would like chunky peanut butter.
Yes, because I'm allergic to not just chunky, but all sorts of peanut butter. I'll tell you what else I'm allergic to, Noah.
What's that?
Taking up more time than we should with this podcast. So it's time to end it. This has been Dark Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from two technology experts. And hopefully you've learned a thing or two, like, for example, to not drink paint. And so with that, then we bid you adieu. I've been your host, Luke Miani.
And I've been your host, Noah Rubin. You can join us every Sunday night at 9 p.m. or most Sunday nights at 9 p.m. To watch live on YouTube. And you can find us on all of your favorite podcast apps to listen throughout the week. You can head over to drkmodepodcast.com to get the links, and you can also find our email address where you can send us questions and we'll include them in the podcast. All the questions we addressed today were sent to us by listeners, and if you send us a question, we might also include it as well. So you should consider doing that.
And with that, we will see you guys next week. Take care.
Good night.